Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we're coming to you towards the end of this week with a special episode as we are joined by a guest. He is an infield prospect in the Orioles organization who recently joined the Orioles after being acquired from the San Diego Padres at this year's trade deadline. Since coming over to the Orioles, he's been at Double-A Chesapeake, where he has performed very well. He is Brandon Butterworth. Brandon, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. So, this is your first full season of professional ball, and we're just down to the last couple of weeks here. How do you feel about the way that this season has gone?
Yeah, it's it's definitely been everything and more than I've expected. Um, this year has been amazing. I've experienced both organizations now with two different levels, being in high A and double A. And this year has just been, like I said, just my expectations have just been shot through the roof this year, which is something that I'm really grateful for.
Yes. What was going back to the trade deadline? Glad to have you on now, a couple weeks after the deadline here to get your perspective on this. But being a first year guy, you're in high A, you're knowing the Padres are in a position to make a run. AJ Preller's at the helm over there, so anything can happen. What was the vibe like in that Fort Wayne clubhouse leading up to the deadline? Was it a heavy topic of discussion down there?
Not as much as you would think. It was honestly very normal, just due to the fact that we didn't have a lot of top prospects on our high A team, and we were playing very well. We had a lot of guys from my draft class who weren't necessarily in the top 30, who were playing really well, putting things together, doing the right things, and we of course had Leo DeVries, who was the number 3 prospect in baseball and our number 1 prospect, who we thought was kind of untouchable, who wasn't really getting traded at all. So it wasn't really the biggest discussion. We kind of were just trying to go through our days, going through the games, without really thinking about it. And when it started to get up pretty close, um, it's some discussion may have sparked, but at the same time, we didn't really talk about it until the day Leo got traded, which was a day before me. And once that happened, that blew everybody out of the water. Nobody expected that.
Yeah, that
Yeah, I
was a
don't.
wild trade.
Yeah. And from
No,
from your
100%.
play
That was crazy.
from a player perspective, especially yours being a first year guy, a young player, I imagine at that point you're getting to a point in the season where you're comfortable with the routine, life as a pro ball player, your teammates, the coaches, any changes that the Padres are making with you, tweaks to your game. Probably feeling pretty good at that point, and then you're uprooted across the country to a brand new organization. What's that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was definitely something I never expected. I showed up to that, I showed up to the field just like a normal day. We had a game that day. I just hit batting practice and was doing some defense, and then got a call from our farm director. And honestly, for me, I kind of thought it was a promotion to double A, which was, something that I wouldn't say I was expecting, but definitely something that I was looking forward to, just due to the fact that I was having a good year. So I was hoping that, with Leo being traded, that, that was the next step in my process with the Padres. And once I was told that I was being dealt to the Orioles, I honestly kind of didn't believe it at first. I was kind of in shock until, it kind of settled in about 20 minutes later that, this was really happening. And I had to say goodbye to everybody, and I had to leave the next morning. And it was honestly such a fast process. But at the same time, it took me about a week to really process everything that really went down. And it was a wild ride, you could say.
You mentioned the prospect status, like top 30 prospect, top 15, top 10. Luckily, that doesn't really matter. And as far as getting to the major leagues, and obviously the Orioles targeted you for a reason. How did that feel as far as, they clearly looked at all the people in the Padres, players in the Padres organization. You were one that sparked their interest. They brought you in, immediately promoted you to double A. How did that process make you feel along those lines?
Yeah, going back to when I got traded, they told me that I was going to the Orioles, and I was kind of confused because we didn't play any Orioles organizations. I wasn't familiar with the Orioles at all, and I was just confused on if I was just kind of being traded just as like a throw-in or something like that, until our farm director basically told me, he was like, they asked for you. Like they saw something they really liked. They had a couple scouts come and watch your games, and they really liked what they saw, and they really wanted to, to pursue you in a trade. And that really kind of set me off in such a good way that I knew that the Orioles wanted me, and that was such a good feeling to have that. Like I said, another organization wants you, and they value you, which is good.
So they didn't have any you didn't have any contact with them like when you were back at NC State going through the draft process. This was just kind of out of the blue completely.
I would say, yeah, 100%. I don't remember anybody from the Orioles really reaching out to me after NC State. It was honestly pretty much only the Padres who were really interested. And so other than that, it was kind of like I said, very very surprising that the Orioles, they saw what they liked in me, and they pursued me, which is awesome.
Yeah, gotta say, after watching you play, I totally get why they targeted you. It's been fun to watch you out there on the field. But since coming over,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
oh yeah, of course. Since coming over to the organization, have the Orioles worked with you to make any adjustments? Are you just following a similar development plan to what you were doing with the Padres?
Yeah, going along with like physicality stuff with like like swings, defense, my body. They've kind of let me stay along the same course that I've had, just because I was having a really good year. I was putting things together that were far out of my expectations. You could say I've with double digit home runs, 20 plus doubles. Like I've been having a really good year, and so they liked what they saw, and they talked to me about my swing. They loved my swing. They didn't really want to change anything there. And I think it was more just letting me get acclimated, honestly, to the organization. And they helped me do a really good job at that, with the coaches, the coordinators, the players, everything. And, I love it here. It's awesome.
That's good to hear.
One thing we've seen in your game that has changed a little bit since you came over to the Orioles is that you're walking much more than you were in the Padres system. Has there been any deliberate changes to your approach to try to become a little bit more patient at the plate, or are you sticking with the same approach that you've had all year?
Yeah, going back to what I just said about my swing itself. It wasn't my swing itself. It was more just kind of an approach based thing. Talking about being called up to Double A, because I wasn't in Double A, so I had no idea how Double A operated with arms and stuff. And I can say that it's a lot better than High A. These guys are really good. These guys are nasty, and they don't make mistakes. So the biggest thing for me was not giving in to them, not letting them beat me with their best pitch out of the zone, because that's what they think they can beat me with. So I think it's more of an approach based thing that they help me with. Things during BP of just really hound in on hitting the pitch that I want, staying in my zone, and not just going out of the zone just because he's a better pitcher. Staying in my being the same person I am, being the same player that I am. And it's helped a lot, and it actually kind of surprised me the first couple of weeks. I was looking up and I had more walks and strikeouts, and I haven't had that since college. In pro ball, it was getting a little tough, just because like pro ball's hard. These pitchers are really good. So I feel like hounding in on my own approach, it brought me back to how I felt in college. With I wasn't swinging at balls, and I was swinging at pitches that I needed to be swinging at.
It's interesting process-wise, because you hear about, especially lately the last few years, that swing decisions is a huge part of player development. But process-wise, what are the drills and the way to go about improving those things? Is it just analyzing your at-bats after the game, or there specific drills?
Yeah, definitely analyzing at bats after the games. We have this whole app based off of swing decisions, and it gives us like a point based system of where the pitch is thrown, where our hot zone is. If it's a 3-2 count, and you take a slider down and away for a ball that's barely off the zone, but it's called a ball, you get plus like 30 points. And let's say if it's an 0-2 count and you take a fastball right down the middle, you get negative 30 points. And there's different things to it. If it's a 3-0 count and you take a slider away for a strike, it's maybe negative zero point 0.1 point, just because that's not the pitch that you want, but it's still considered a strike. So they looked at that in ways that I never knew were honestly thought of in baseball, just because I never thought of a point system being thought of when I'm hitting with balls and strikes. And after I kind of studied it and started working with it and seeing how my game has changed with that, it's helped a lot. And then going along with batting practice, we have this thing called the med ball where we put literally a med ball in the strike zone. It's just a circle, and it's pretty much just where you want to hit the ball. It's like in your med ball is in your hot zone of where you should be hitting the baseball. So just staying hound into that approach, staying hound in, and if you see a ball in the med ball, you swing at it. If you don't, you try to lay off of it.
Yeah, the point system makes a ton of sense, especially with highly competitive people to gamify it, right? That makes you even more want to get those high points, I'm sure.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yes. I'm curious because I know you're from North Carolina, right? You were at Western Carolina before going to NC State. I do have to say I'm not over you guys ending JMU's season in 2024 in that Raleigh regional. That's going to hurt for a little while, but you guys had a hell of a team that year. So glad it was you guys and not South Carolina that took that regional. But how does it feel to be back
I
on the
agree.
East Coast, closer to friends and family now?
Yeah, yeah, awesome. For sure. When I first got to Arizona, because that's where the Padres, spring training stuff and everything was going on, it was definitely a change. There's a lot of new moving parts going on with me, getting acclimated to pro ball in general, and then just being so far away from home, having to FaceTime my friends, having to call my mom instead of, being able to see her, it was definitely different. And I think now, being so close to home, I got to see my brother 2 weeks ago for my birthday, and then my mom the week after, and that was awesome seeing them for the first time in a pretty long time. So I feel like it makes things easier, through struggle, through triumph. I feel like that definitely makes things easier seeing the people that you love. So I feel like that's also helped a lot.
And growing up there, what was your team? Did you have major league team, or were you more focused on college?
No, I definitely did. I grew up a Red Sox fan. My family is all from Boston, so I grew up a Red Sox fan.
That's all right. We'll allow it.
Yeah, that trade with San Diego was a pretty huge trade. A lot of guys coming over. I don't believe anyone at the
Can
time.
you, let's see.
Oops, can you hear us?
Oops. Yeah, I can.
Okay. A lot of the guys in that trade with San Diego, I don't believe any of them were in Fort Wayne with you. I might be wrong there, but is there? Did you have any sort of close relationship with any of those guys in San Diego that came over with you to Baltimore?
Yeah, all those guys are actually in my draft class. I was pretty close with Cobb Hightower. I knew him since high school. He's from the same area as me. He was in low A when we started. Victor Figueroa, I got pretty close with him during our draft camps. He's a really good kid. He's in Aberdeen now, doing pretty well. Boston Bateman and Tanner Smith, those are two pitchers. I didn't get the closest with them. They're definitely they're awesome kids. Love them. I just didn't really get the close with them just due to them being pitchers, and we have different schedules. But my roommate now, I think he's in his room now. It's Tyson Neighbors. I got pretty close to Tyson. He was in Fort Wayne for a little bit until he got called up, and I think that's probably the closest one that I've had.
He's fun to watch too. Oh man, I can't wait till he's in the,
Yeah,
the major
he's
league
electric.
bullpen blowing guys away.
Yeah, he's electric.
I think I have the next one. Sorry about that. Have you noticed? I know we talked about like the specific things that the Orioles have done with you since you come over, but is there, just from an overall player development standpoint, from the coordinators, the coaches, the what have you, is there a big difference between how the Padres are handling things versus how the Orioles are?
Yeah, yes and no. It's another organization. It's a different organization, so they definitely handle things differently, but it's all towards the same goal. If that makes sense, they talk about different things, but in a full scheme of things, it all means the same thing. I love the way the Orioles handle things. I love the way the coordinators talk. I love the way the coordinators are, coaches, managers, everything. I love the way that they are. They're very personable. They're very, about the player, which is good. I love that. So that's definitely helped me a lot with, keeping me the same player that I am, just because it wasn't a big change at all, and I feel like that's good.
You played primarily shortstop throughout your college career. Played a lot of shortstop here in the pros, a lot of second base as well, even a little bit of run in the outfield. I imagine you probably feel best at shortstop, being that guy coming up. But how do you handle that moving around the diamond a little bit, like because we know here with the Orioles, I don't know if you're familiar yet, they really value that defensive versatility. And I mean, we even watched Jordan Westberg when he got up to AAA play a lot of left field before he got the call up. Um, Even though you've only got a little bit of time out, that thing is like what 5 or 6 games in the outfield. Just how difficult is that transition for someone like yourself to move around like that on a sometimes game to game basis?
Yeah, I think I look at it as a very positive way. Just, in Fort Wayne, I started playing the outfield instead of having my off day. I was playing 6 days a week and I was playing 5 days in the infield and then one day in the outfield. And I was looking at that as a positive because I got more at bats and they valued my bat in the lineup, which is something that, it brought my confidence up and it's something that allowed me to, stick in the lineup, which is awesome. I love playing every single day. And then going back to what you said about, how different I feel like it's, it's still baseball at the same time. Me playing infield my whole life, I feel like it's helped me become a pretty decent outfielder. I'd like to say, I think I'm a pretty decent outfielder just with, the routes, the defensive versatility with, the ground balls and stuff. I feel like it's all nearly the same. I definitely had to work on it a little bit in Fort Wayne, but once I started getting, pretty good at it in batting practice and stuff, it helped a lot. And, me being confident and me staying, just level headed about it, I looked at it as definitely a positive.
You're smooth as butter out there, which leads me to the last thing I have, which is with the last name Butterworth, you got to have some great nicknames, right? I'm sure you could give us a couple of things guys call you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, everybody here, Padres, Orioles, my buddies, even my teachers in high school, they used to call me Butters. That's just, my name pretty much have always stuck in the baseball world. And, it kind of originated a little bit out of baseball, but that definitely started when I was about 10 years old. Everybody started calling me Butters. And then, butter in Spanish is mantequilla. So all the Latins who come, from the other countries, they started calling me mantequilla. And that's pretty much, have always stuck. So if it's weird, the other day somebody was saying Brandon a couple times and I just didn't register that they were talking to me because I think the only like 3 or 4 people that call me Brandon are my mom, my brother, and I think a couple of my really, really close friends, and that's about it. So I heard Brandon. I didn't turn around until they said Butters, and I turned around. They're like, did you not hear me? And I was like, no. What are you saying? They're like, I'm saying Brandon. I was like, well, that's probably why you're sitting there calling me Brandon. I have no idea you're talking to me.
Yeah, Orioles Hall of Famer and broadcaster Jim Palmer, his nickname was Cakes for pancakes. That could fit too. Another
That's
Cakes.
awesome.
I,
There you
I have
go.
one more.
Perfect.
I have one more question as well. Just for fans who aren't as familiar with your game, being a newer player to the organization, what part of your game do you pride yourself on the most?
I think just playing the game the right way. I think baseball is, was not necessarily in a downhill slope of people playing the game the right way, but I think it got to, I like old school baseball. I like, you hit a ground ball to short, you run a hard 90. I've been fortunate to beat a couple ground balls out this year, and that's given me a couple hits. I know you look back on a year and you have, 5 or 6 more hits of those, that can change a season. I feel like just playing the game the right way. I feel like baseball rewards you when you do things like that. You get good karma. So, just playing the game the right way, being a good teammate, always staying level headed, not being, too hard on myself, but just always playing the game the right way, the hard way. So I feel like that's something that people can always, expect out of me, whether I'm 0 for 20 or 20 for 20, I'm always going to play the same way.
Fans definitely appreciate that, so that's cool. Yeah.
We'll go in now to our final segment, Last Call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located 1421 Ridgely Street. Checker Spot is not far from Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And when you're at the ballpark this year, be sure to check out the Beer Sam behind home plate where you get one of Checker Spot's signature beers, The Bird is the Word. And now, Brandon, we're going to go to a question here that we always like to ask players when they come on, whether it's a pitcher or a hitter. It's a variation of this question. And I'll go ahead and let Bob take this one.
Yeah. We've been talking about the last year or two that the year of the pitching was 2024 in the Orioles farm system and prospects coming up. And there's even more pitchers, it seems like this year, who have really come to light, especially Double A. I mean, they're pretty deep in pitchers. So which arm on the Double A Chesapeake Bay Sox would you least like to face in the box with the game on the line?
Oganda, 100%. He's a Latin pitcher. From the right side, it's a crossfire. 3/4 arm slot that's 96, 98 from the right side, and I think that is terrifying from a right-handed batter. So I feel like facing him would kind of be very uncomfortable. And it's funny you said that. I was joking about it last night when he was throwing. I had an off day yesterday, and I was talking to our pitching coach, and I was like, he'd be a nightmare to face. And he was like, I can set that up in spring training if you want to face him. And I was like, you know what? I appreciate the offer, but I'm good. I'm totally good on that.
Happy to be on the same team as him. I'm sure. No, he seems like a really interesting relief.
Yeah, exactly. I'm happy to keep a couple of my bats. I don't really like to break bats, so I think I'm good at that.
Nice.
Well, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck with the final weeks here of the 2025 season.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Butters.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
It was great stuff.
That does it for this episode of Orioles on the Verge. We'll be back next week to recap the Aberdeen Ironbirds and Delmarva Swordbirds seasons. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and Blue Sky. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community today. You can join to $3, $5, or $10 levels and have access to bonus weekly shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list. In fact, our list for the month of September just dropped. So if you sign up to become a patron today, you'll have access to that and a whole lot more. So don't miss out. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.